Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, social media.
Get our music started, and we'll let everybody in this evening.
Hello and good evening. Good evening and welcome everybody to the Veterans Breakfast Club. I am Todd DiPastino, the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a national nonprofit based here in Pittsburgh, and we hold veteran storytelling programs in person, online. We publish a magazine, we do travel, and tonight we're doing some storytelling around the West Point class of 1966. The West Point class of 1966 had 579 graduates, 29 of whom were killed in Vietnam. An additional 4 who were members of the class at one point were also killed in Vietnam and Korea. So that's a total of 33 out of the class of 579. Over 100 of that class were wounded, and I'm guessing pretty much every member of the class served in Vietnam, or very close to it. So we have members of the class of 66 here with us, Fritz Ernst and Barry Morton. We have Rusty Correa. We have John Loftheim. We have others, I'm sure that I'm missing. And we have Ruth Crocker, whose husband was killed in Vietnam, also class of 1966, also contributed mightily to the creation of the film that we're going to screen tonight. And the film is called The Tribute to Our Fallen Brothers. It is a film created by the class of 1966 in memory and in tribute to those who lost their lives in Vietnam. So we're going to screen the film, which is an hour and 20 minutes long, and then we're going to regroup after the film is screened and have a conversation with members of the class and with family members and others. So thank you for joining us to remember this. I should say it's a famous class, and it was made famous by Rick Atkinson's great book, The Long Gray Line, which is about the journey of the class of West Point of 1966 through the Vietnam War. So, without further ado, I'm going to give another minute or two for some of our tardy class members here to join us, and then I will share my screen and share the sound and start the program.
And we'll ask that everybody turns off their video while watching the film, just to cut down on any distractions, and we'll make sure to mute everybody. So if I see that your video's on, I will turn it off, but you will be able to turn it back on once the film is done.
Thank you very much, Sean. And thank you, Glenn, also for joining us. Glenn, before we start the film, we want to let people know that we have a program Thursday night, of course, on Greatest Generation Live at 7 p.m. What are we covering on Thursday night?
The Battle of Manila, a book by Nick Serentakis, who's a very detailed, well-written military historian. And, the subject is not well known within World War II literature, so it should be very interesting.
Okay, well, that's coming
And
up.
Saturday, don't forget, we've got the movie showing of The Pressure. Still time to register if you would like to.
Yes, if you live in the Pittsburgh area, we're going to be screening the film in a movie theater, the Phoenix Movie Theater in Bridgeville at the Chartiers Valley Shopping Plaza. The movie is Pressure, the new movie about the decision to go on D-Day and the debate over the weather. And we're going to screen it at 1:30. Join us, please, if you can. We're going to introduce it, then we're going to talk about it afterwards. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Let's start the film, and then we will start talking about it and talking with our guests after we screen it. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to start over. I'm going to start over to make sure that I have share sound.
It began as it always had begun for 160 consecutive years. On a beautiful summer day, July 2nd, 1962, 807 carefully selected, athletic, academic, physically fit, and rightfully nervous young American men arrived at the United States Military Academy at West Point and began the process of becoming new cadets. Within hours, they had been measured, uniformed, issued large bags of equipment, received a near shave-style haircut, been fed very little, learned how to march, and met their new roommates and, most importantly, their Beast Barracks squad leader. At 5 p.m. that afternoon, which they already had learned was more correctly 1,700 hours, this entire group assembled into squads, companies, and battalions and marched out to Trophy Point, where countless parents and friends anxiously searched for any sighting of their new cadet, who would be taking the oath of office and thus becoming a member of the class of 1966 and, potentially, the long gray line. It was probably the longest day of their lives, and now there were only 47 months left to graduation. By the next day, the class was already smaller as the attrition began. July soon became August, and with the end of Beast and the start of the academic year, additional classmates were added as termbacks from the class of 1965, raising the total class size to 831.
On another beautiful day, almost 4 years later, on Wednesday, June 8, 1966, having lost 30% of those who began this journey, 579 graduates threw their caps in the air and became new second lieutenants. Ranger and airborne training would follow after 60 days of well-earned graduation leave or vacation. The 4 years had witnessed the transition of classmates from boys to men, from cadet to military officer, and the nation and world had borne witness to intensification of the Cold War, complete with internal and external political turbulence. Military attention had shifted from large-scale land warfare deterrence in Europe to a very hot and growing insurgent conflict in Vietnam, with U.S. troops already deployed to the area. Communism remained the external threat focus, and internally there was growing questions about politics, race, patriotism, and traditional values as counterculture and anti-war sentiments were gathering strength. The news of the 60s was dominated by stories about the space race, Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Bay of Pigs, combat in the Dominican Republic, Gulf of Tonkin resolution, U.S. troop deployments to South Vietnam, Martin Luther King freedom marches and speeches, war casualties, draft card burning, student demonstrations and riots, anti-war parades, assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy, and general societal unrest.
At graduation, uncertainty was everywhere, except there was certainty that Vietnam was in all our personal futures. The legacy of the class of 1966 has been the totality of their service to this nation. This video is intended to present that story with a strong focus on our fallen brothers.
Following 60 glorious days of graduation leave, everyone reported for duty. Training and assignments spanning the globe began. Most spent several months at Fort Benning undergoing training in parachute jumping, airborne school, and Ranger school, with Ranger providing the crucible of training many would put into practice in Southeast Asia. It is difficult to capsulize the Ranger school experience into words. Most would characterize it as the most physically and mentally demanding training of their career. Ultimately, you mostly stop thinking about it. But if 2 or more classmates are gathered anywhere for any reason, even now, 60 years later, Ranger School experiences will come up in animated fashion. Reality hit us quickly as we learned that one of our class, Billy Flynn, had been killed in combat action in Vietnam in January 1967. This had happened even before some of us had completed schooling and arrived at our first assignment. The news from Vietnam continued to be grim as casualties and deaths continued to mount with no end on the horizon. The members of the class of 1966 were all young, enthusiastic company-grade officers, second lieutenants, first lieutenants, and captains during 1967, 1968, and 1969, years which witnessed the conflict's heaviest fighting, greatest exposure, and highest casualties. The tactics employed and the nature of small unit operations tended to create maximum exposure for these young officers. Essentially all the members of the class of 1966 will serve in Vietnam at least once, many twice, and they served with distinction throughout the conflict. The total killed or wounded during all Vietnam for all members of all services is 1 in 10 or 10%. The experience for the class of 1966, all serving as junior officers, mostly serving between 1967 and 1970, and all serving in combat arms was 1 in 5 or 20%. Their valor was manifest. 1966 graduates are awarded 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, nearly 80 Silver Stars, scores of Purple Hearts. But tragically, 29 graduates of the class are killed in action. These are our fallen brothers.
1967. The year was marked by the civil rights movement, race riots, anti-war protests, and psychedelic rock at home, while the war in Vietnam intensified and the first members of our class set foot in country. General Westmoreland, commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, was employing a strategy of attrition in the belief that our combat effectiveness, due to its superior artillery and air power, would be able to attrit enemy combatants from the battlefield faster than they could be replaced. This controversial concept gave rise to an emphasis on body count. Although small unit actions led by young officers like our classmates were common, 1967 also saw major battles like Junction City, an airborne air mobile operation, and Coronado 9, a riverine operation. Major battles included Dak To and the First Battle of Loc Ninh. The U.S. suffered 11,363 killed in action in 1967, bringing the consequences of war home to our class, as well as to their families and their friends. Our class lost 8 graduates and 2 former classmates who were commissioned via ROTC. One of those losses was my classmate, my brother, and my best friend.
It saddens me to remember that how young some of them were. Billy Flynn was the first one to die in Vietnam 6 months after graduation. And it saddens me to think that they were so young and their lives were ended so quickly, doing what they like to do best. Billy wanted to be a soldier. Billy was a very proud paratrooper. We went to the prep school at Fort Belvoir together. I remember Billy at the prep school. This was in the early 60s. He was a proud paratrooper. There were probably 6 out of maybe 120 of us that went to the prep school, which prepared us in terms of preparing for the SATs, math and English and so on. One classmate joked about him in his memorial article about being so light and small that when he jumped out of an airplane, they suggested that he carry a machine gun so that he would come to the ground more quickly. He did what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a soldier. He had left high school before he graduated, enlisted, went to jump school because it's something he wanted to do to become a paratrooper. He got his GED at the prep school and was one of the few cadets who ever entered that didn't actually have a regular high school degree.
Frank Radvicki. Frank and I were dear friends. Frank was born in the Panama Canal Zone, spoke fluent Spanish, and Frank was tall, good-looking, he had this incredible smile. I swear, half his face was teeth. He sang in the Glee Club. He had a beautiful tenor voice, played the guitar, but he was a charmer. Frank was a charmer, but Frank was an amazing, amazing guy. People dying needlessly in Vietnam, and Frank was certainly a case in point.
Fred Bertolino was the first one that I was going to talk to, and Fred came from Illinois. Fred was a jovial guy, and there's no question why he came to West Point. He was National Honor Society. He did Boys State, which is hard to get into. He was the first and only appointment from the senator that he got his appointment from in Illinois, which basically says something there. He was quiet in a sense, but then, and what he may be remembered for the rest of his life, he was a musician. He sang, played the guitar. Fred was just a genuinely honest and sincere brother from West Point. He didn't shirk his responsibilities when the call for Vietnam came. He went to the 9th Division at Fort Lewis, Washington. They deployed to the Mekong Delta, which is down in the 4th Corps of Vietnam, which is where I was stationed with the Ranger Battalion. And he went out with the 9th Division, went out on an operation, and they got attacked. And even though he was wounded, his first priority was to evacuate the wounded. Well, unfortunately, the helicopters couldn't get in. The firing was so intense at that battle. And overnight, Fred passed away. We'll remember Fred as a brother, as a jovial guy when he wanted to be, as a quiet and sincere guy when he needed to be. As the musician he was, I'm sure he's up there with his guitar right now, trying to figure out what the next song's going to be, and looking down on us and saying, maybe I'll play something you guys like. That's kind of what I remember about Fred Bertolino.
Richard Elmo Hood. Richard was my roommate, my second plebe year, his first plebe year, and came up as a highly motivated young man. He was a member of the, National Honor Society, and had all kinds of high academic credentials. And that's one of the incredible things about West Point, is that you just get a lot of people who are tops in their class. Richard was highly motivated, worked hard, made good grades, selected infantry, had his goals set. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. And he was one of the 98 that volunteered to try to be the first in Vietnam. His time came up to go to Vietnam, then he volunteered to go with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. The 173rd was kind of General Westmoreland's shock troops, so to say. Whenever there was a major battle or a major conflict that came up in Vietnam, he would send the 173rd out to take care of the problem, which always led to some kind of intense combat. Richard joined them at a time when they were outside of Dak To in the hill country, as they called it. Jerry Cecil was a part of that group as well. Rich and one other classmate, Don Judd, reported in to this place at the same time, and they were assigned right away to a unit that was involved in this intense battles in the hill country. Rich had been in country 2 weeks, as had Don Judd, when they were both killed in action.
Don Judd, a great American from Alexander, New York. He went to Notre Dame High School, where he was a defensive end starter for 3 football seasons. That's where he learned and epitomized teamwork. At West Point, I saw Don, and he continued selfless service. When he graduated, he finished airborne school and Ranger school, and then went to the 82nd Airborne Division. That was a big deal for him and for any classmate who went to the 82nd. And 6 months after he got there, he got married to Mary Leahy, a young lady whom he met in his second class year at West Point. He was with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. Don was awarded the Silver Star posthumously for his gallantry in action. He was wounded, but yet he got up facing fires because he saw a wounded comrade. He went out, rescued him, pulled him back to relative safety. He went out again. He was hit again and mortally wounded and gave the supreme sacrifice there at Dak To in Vietnam. That's the story of Don Judd.
Every time it comes up with Denny, I get a feeling of loss, tremendous loss. We were together for 22 years, bouncing around. My dad was in the military too. And so we were the closest of friends, not just brothers, we were the closest of friends. And it was ripped away so quickly that I just never expected it. You know, those things are tough, at least they're tough for me. And as I've told my wife, I never really had a chance to grieve. Too many things happened right away when Denny was killed, and I had to go over right. In fact, I was on my way over when the whole thing happened. My brother was always confident, he was calm, he was a caring person. If someone needed something, Denny was the first to go. It seemed like he always had a smile on his face. And even when in the first couple of years, he was recognized as a leader. I've had a number of classmates that have come up to me afterwards and said, you know, Denny was one of two of the best cadets that I ever knew. I don't know, Denny was such a loss. It was somebody that just could have done so many great things. Denny and I both knew what we were doing when we signed up. After 4 years at West Point and the training that we had been through, people may think duty, honor, country is just a phrase, but it's not. At least it's not for the vast majority, if not all of the class that I know. It meant something, it still means something. We'd been trained and we decided to go.
Yeah, this gentleman was one of our real class favorites. His name was Richard William Thompson. We called him Buck Thompson. He was a little bit older, and he could have gone. He was a big athlete in Kansas, and he could have gone directly to any of the military academies, but he decided he'd go to Kansas University, and he didn't do that he did that for a while, and then he went and became a paratrooper. Then he joined our class when he was a little bit older. But he was a tough character with a real strong personality, and so he stood up to a lot of the upperclassmen. So he had a very hard first year. But we all loved him, and I was with him the second summer at Camp Buckner. We were in the same ALCO, same squad. He's just extremely talented, funny, gifted person. And so it didn't surprise me that he was going to do well in the Army. And again, he married right after graduation, and his son was born just about, I think it was 3 weeks to a month before he deployed to Vietnam. And we had a lot of classmates he was one of the early ones that went there, that he volunteered the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And we had a lot of classmates that were lost and wounded there in the Battle of Dak To. And he was killed there. He saved, led his platoon in combat, and he saved his platoon sergeant who had been left behind, and then later himself was killed. It makes me sad. I mean, Buck was a real character, and we all thought the world of him. And I wish I had the opportunity to serve with him, in the Army.
Pete Lance. Pete and I went to the prep school also, as I did with Billy. He was wise, he was smart, he loved poetry. He married a gal named Dagmar, who was a German refugee, a wonderful gal who I stay in touch with periodically even now. He was a pleasure to be around. He had a great sense of humor. He was a fun guy, and he also died too young, as did Billy. Another part of his story is that his wife Dagmar gave birth to their daughter Crystal 2 weeks before he was killed.
This is a coming to you live from the boat.
1968. This may have been the most critical year of the war. The casualties were far greater than any other year, with the U.S. sustaining a total of 16,592 killed in action. 1968 began with the sustained Battle of Khe Sanh that lasted until July. But the most significant attack was the coordinated Tet Offensive that was a full-on attack in every major city and province in South Vietnam. The enemy expected the South Vietnamese army to fail and the populace to rise up in support of the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army. But the opposite happened. The South Vietnamese army fought very well. The U.S. units fought decisively, defeating both Vietnamese and Viet Cong units. The Viet Cong were nearly eliminated. The North Vietnamese were defeated everywhere, and the battle was, on the ground, a complete and widespread victory. But at home, Tet was portrayed by the media as a political and military disaster.
To say that we are mired in stalemate seems the only realistic, if unsatisfactory, conclusion. But it is increasingly clear to this report that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victims.
The U.S. homeland was shocked and never again recovered optimism about the war.
On Sunday evening, March 31st, President Lyndon Johnson delivered a radio and television address to the American people.
I shall not seek, and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
LBJ surprised the nation by announcing on March 31st, 1968, that he would not run for re-election the following November. General Westmoreland was replaced by General Abrams in July 1968. There is continual leadership criticism, a surge in anti-war activity. Summer brings the Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy assassinations. The Democrat convention in Chicago features nightly riots. Race riots begin particularly in Detroit. The nation is on fire, and in November, Richard Nixon easily defeats Hubert Humphrey for president. In Vietnam, there are more members of the class of 1966 serving than any other time, and the losses of the class are the greatest of any year. 12 members of the class of 66 are killed in action in 1968. One of them was my brother.
Charlie Johnson. I remember Chuck was from South Carolina, and he talked like he was from South Carolina. Big draw, always had a smile on his face. He was on the karate club. He was a black belt, and he wanted to be a ranger. Ranger Johnson, he was known as. Everybody thought he was going to be in the infantry, but for some reason, when we selected our branches, he chose military intelligence. Charlie married his high school sweetheart right after graduation. She was a kindergarten teacher in South Carolina, and he deployed to Vietnam and was with a MACV, the Military Assistance Command Group advisory team, as an intelligence officer, and was killed by rifle fire in a hamlet that they were trying to gather some intelligence with. But I always remember Charlie, never saw Charlie without a big smile on his face.
Skip McKibben, Hugh R. McKibben. Skip had gone to, he was a soldier by the time he got to West Point. You know, he had gone to Massanutten High School, but military high school. His dad was an Annapolis graduate. He was always put together. You know, he knew how to be a soldier already. And And then he went to the prep school, which is in preparation to come to West Point, one of the military programs. So he was straight, good-looking soldier, knew how to wear his uniform perfectly, was smart and kind, and just helped all of us kids that were really kids at that point. Pistol team All-American, top in the class in automotive engineering. Was on the Ring and Crest Committee for all 4 years. Was killed in February 1968. Again with the 1st Infantry Division. He was an armor officer and had volunteered to take a less experienced officer's platoon into combat. It was killed. Just another example of a guy that had so much to offer this nation in terms of not just his soldierly skills, but his leadership and his commitment to values.
Frank was a prep schooler. He had prior service. He was born about 3 months before Pearl Harbor. He grew up in Baltimore, went to Catholic school, was an acolyte at church, and joined the Army right out of high school. Frank was an avid squash player, always competing to be on the squash team, and he was on what we call the hop committee. At West Point, dances are referred to as hops. A real social butterfly. He did not go to Vietnam immediately. He spent 6 months after Airborne and Ranger School, which we all went to. He spent 6 months in the States before he deployed, and wound up with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, which unfortunately a lot of our classmates were in and got killed. Was killed trying to rescue a couple of soldiers who were under fire at an outpost. He was truly a hero, attempting to rescue some soldiers who had been wounded, and was killed in the attempt to do that. So that's Frank was one of the good guys.
Robert Wayne Lucky. Bob Lucky came from Parma, Ohio. He was my roommate yearling year, or my sophomore year. Bob was kind of a gentle giant. He was about 6'5". He had been very intelligent, also been in the National Honor Society in high school, had distinguished himself in football, basketball, track, and also enjoyed singing. He and I both sang in the Protestant chapel choir and the glee club. Bob was just a nice guy, easygoing, followed the rules, didn't get in trouble. Bob was very professional. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be infantry. Bob was kind of at the end of the Tet Offensive when he was caught in an ambush when they went out on a military operation, and was killed in action at that point in time. His brother was a cadet member of the class of '69. His name was Richard. Sad to say that Richard died some years later, and the two of them, share a gravesite up in the West Point Cemetery.
Howie Pontuck. Howie and I had times together in the Jewish chapel choir. He was from Brooklyn, New York. He was short. He was a hell of a gymnast. He was the captain of the gym team in his senior year. I remember seeing him periodically on the parallel bars, and he was very fit, of course, to be able to do those kind of things. He went to Vietnam. He was with a U.S. unit there initially, a mechanized unit that traveled in armored personnel carriers. There was a minefield that had to be cleared, and Howie volunteered to go out into the minefield. He was killed, and he was a good guy, and he smiled a lot and laughed a lot, and he was a good friend.
So first of all, I'll talk about Jack Barrow. So Jack and I were in Company E2 together, and we're about the same size, and everybody got us mixed up. They would call me Mr. Farrer, they would call him Mr. Clark, and we had a lot of duties together, and we delivered laundry together. We were on the duty roster a lot together. Jack was a Yankee. He was from Massachusetts, and I was from Arkansas, and so we were, opposites, but we were always pretty close, and so we had a lot of respect for each other. He was a great man. He did a great job as a platoon leader in Vietnam. He was killed with his platoon, and company was hit. He worked the platoon forward. He was up there forward with the platoon, and then he tried to stabilize the situation. He had it stabilized, and then at one point or another, somebody got him. But he was heroic under fire, and that's exactly what you'd expect from Jack Farrar.
David was a young infantry lieutenant that was killed in Vietnam as an advisor. And the young son never knew his father. That's one of the tragedies of war. But Dave he was a good guy, and he always had a smile on his face, and he was a good golfer. And then we were in Ranger School together, and so he was this mild-mannered, smile on his face kind of guy, but he was a tough soldier. And so I knew he would do well in Vietnam. It's sad, I read one of the comments about what some young soldier had been with him, and he thought so much of him. And if one of your young soldiers says that about you, that means a lot. And so, now every time I go back to West Point, Dave's buried at West Point. I always go back to the cemetery and go back and pay tribute to him. He was a special guy, 23 years old when he died. And so I think about that a lot.
Tommy Hayes, Thomas J. Hayes IV, who was a very close friend of mine. We were roommates in our, what we call a cow years, our junior year, and became close friends. He was my Ranger buddy. We were in Vietnam, went to Vietnam right about the same time. He was a remarkable individual. Came from a little line. He's buried at West Point with his grandfather, who was a two-star general, his father, who was a two-star general. This is a guy that you'd be proud to have as President of the United States. The top of our class, top 2% of our class the whole time. You name it. He was the chairman of our honor committee. Instead of going to graduate school, he volunteered, like all of us that went over there early, straight to Vietnam. He did it because it was the call to action. That's part of the duty. It's what you sign up for. We knew we were going, and he signed up early to do that.
He asked to be assigned to the 82nd Airborne in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which he was. So he ended up with the long-range reconnaissance patrols that went behind enemy lines to observe and report back. And then he went with the CAV units and participated in over 100 assault missions, helicopter assault missions. And it was on one of those missions that Tom was killed, rescuing 2 of his wounded soldiers. When I learned of Tom's death, I wept uncontrollably. This is about who Tom Hayes was. But perhaps I think it's really more important that it's about what he stood for, how he lived his life, and how we feel the people who knew him feel about him and love him. Thanks, Tommy. Rest in peace.
It's my honor to speak about Pete Donnell. He was in the 1st Regiment. He grew up in a military family, which was not entirely uncommon at West Point. His experience was that his father was an active duty Army officer, and he grew up with his family and lived with his father as he was in his various assignments around the world. Most notably, they had a number of years in France where they lived, and Peter and his sister, who I've gotten to know and would consider a friend, they attended high school in Orleans, France. At West Point, Peter was exceptional. He was whiz at languages. He was a member of 3 different language clubs. He was on the speech and debate forum for all 4 years. While in Vietnam, he was initially in a platoon, and after doing a great job in that category, he was moved with a rapid succession into a staff office position at the brigade level. On April 26 of '68, his platoon came under significant contact from an unknown size enemy force, and they were pinned down and there were casualties taken immediately. Pete came to the front of his platoon and then actually crawled along the ground to his wounded men, helped secure them and move them to safety, which is an act that we find threading its way through almost all the stories of all of our fallen brothers. Something on that of a similar note. It's not at all a surprise or uncommon. It is the behavior that was exhibited by these leaders over and over. In doing so, he suffered significant wounds himself. He sort of shrugged them off and continued to lead the counteroffensive, which was successful in stabilizing the situation, and ultimately reinforcements did arrive. During that time, unfortunately, he was wounded again, and it was demanded that he be moved to shelter, which he reluctantly allowed to happen, and then he was air evac'd from the battlefield and passed away on that flight. He received 3 Bronze Stars and several additional decorations, as well as a Purple Heart.
John Hoskins was he was from Sulphur, Louisiana. He was a natural leader. I mean, just a natural guy you'd looked at and you could tell this guy knows what he's doing. Flash forward to Vietnam, where he was in, I don't know what, 5th or the 60th or some other unit other than our brigade. And I was pulled up to be on the Division G3 staff because my battalion commander had made the position of G3 and he wanted me up there and pull me up. And so John came by one day and said, "What do you know about the airboat company?" I said, "Well, they've got them over there, but they're experimental. They don't know how to use it or anything like that." And he came in and talked to me and said, "It's just a mess." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we're riding down the river. Those things make terrible noise, and they're distinct, and the enemy can see us, and they'll shoot us up, and there's no armor on it." I thought, well, God almighty, what are you going to do about it? And he said, "Well, I'm going to talk to the leadership about it, tell them it's wrong." And so he did, but he didn't do it soon enough, I guess, because he was killed, shot riding down the road, riding down the stream, and they heard him and shot and killed him. So that was John Hoskins. That was a tragedy and a big-time loss for the class.
Art Parker. Art he was just an all-American. Came from South Carolina, so we sort of bonded together as Southern boys. We were roommates for the last 4 months at West Point. It was a really special time at West Point. We got our cars. We had off-post liberties. We could do things. We double dated. He was dating this beautiful young woman who was an airline stewardess in New York City, and he and his date and me and my wife, future wife, were together a lot. We went across the river to Peekskill. It was the time when we bought cars. I took Art's advice on what car to buy. Of course, the car of the year was the GTO, the Pontiac GTO. Of course, Art bought a GTO. Everybody loved him. He was a fantastic guy, and he could make things happen just by the force of his personality without ever offending anybody. And it was a tremendous loss.
David Brown was in my company, Company D3. Dave taught me how to ski at West Point. He was an avid skier and knew what he was doing.
And I respected and admired him immensely. He had a great sense of humor. He loved to ski. And of course, that's why he chose Fort Carson, was so that he could do the skiing. But he wanted to go to Vietnam. He was very anxious to get to Vietnam. And I asked Dave to be my groomsman, and he agreed to do this. And this was just before he was scheduled to deploy. Dave, what a character.
He was such a great friend, and I was absolutely devastated when he was killed on 7 September 1968. I mean, I can't tell you, even to this day, I think about him and wish he were here. He was a special guy.
The year is 1969. At home and in Vietnam, there's now a new policy. At home, we speak about peace and troop withdrawals. In Paris, there are ongoing peace talks, but with very little progress. The new war focus is a policy called Vietnamization. In quick summary, this was an intent to gradually decrease the combat presence of U.S. units and strengthen and equip South Vietnamese units so that they might completely take over the defensive and offensive activity. Politically, there is no appetite to find a pathway to victory. The entire focus is to find an honorable exit door for the U.S. military. Peace talks are at an impasse. So in the spring, President Nixon orders secret bombing to begin in Cambodia, and this actually spurs progress in Paris, but also creates anti-war rage at home when the bombing story is leaked to the New York Times. Ironically, efforts to seal these leaks lead to creation of the Plumbers, a secret White House group which later will lead to Watergate and Nixon's resignation. The first 25,000 U.S. troops are withdrawn in June of 1969, and there's no going back. In Vietnam, the U.S. killed in action will be the second greatest number of the war, with a total of 11,616. 6 members of the class of 1966 are killed in action during this year, including my husband.
Frank Metzer. Frank was an Army brat, a long line of military veterans in his history of his family. And while being born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, he went to George Washington High School here in Alexandria, Virginia. He deployed for the first year to Korea, where he was a platoon leader and company commander in the demilitarized zone. Frank volunteered for Vietnam. He went to Vietnam. He served in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. He also was an advisor to the Vietnamese Army, and then served as a platoon leader and company commander in the 1st Cavalry Division. It's there where Frank met his demise. Again, a selfless leader, leading from the front. Frank Metzer led from the front. He earned the Silver Star there because of his heroic, valorous actions there. Frank lays at rest in Arlington National Cemetery next to the graves of his father and his mother. That's Frank Metzer. Great American, great classmate, hero, whole man.
Dave Crocker, we were together all 4 years at West Point. Really unusual because we changed companies after the first 2 years, and we ended up going from Company E2 to Company V4. And Dave was, he was always exceptionally mature, really balanced, really capable, real athletic, really physically fit, and just not only physically fit, but morally, emotionally, just totally balanced. He fell in love with a girl. We double dated a couple of times. I was best man at his wedding. I mean, Dave was just a wonderful human being. He was a company commander in Vietnam, mechanized infantry company, as I recall. And there was a bunker, and he went in to see what was in the Viet Cong bunker. And I guess it was a booby trap, and it blew up, and he died of the wounds, and it's a tremendous loss.
Al Culpepper, great guy, laid back, easy going, just a good old guy from Louisiana. And something that you probably don't realize about a lot of these folks is they're more than just military guys standing out here. He was a poet, He was recognized for it in Louisiana. He was an orator. He was recognized for that. He was president of his student council, and then he got his appointment to West Point. He found, let's see, I guess it was in the third year, he met a girl by the name of Nancy. She was from New York, a nursing student up in Buffalo. They hit it off right away, and for those last 2 years, she was down almost every weekend that she could get away with Al. As you might imagine, they got married a few days after graduation. After that, he was deployed to Germany. They were over there for about a year and a half. They had their daughter, Rebecca, and then Al got his call to go over to Vietnam. He went on a fire support base one evening, I guess it was around midnight, when the Viet Cong attacked. They attacked with mortars. They launched a ground attack. And Al, from the citation that I read, Al was instrumental in getting all of his men to react in the appropriate manner. So he launched a reaction against the Viet Cong. 4 of his guns had been hit bad. They were out of commission, and there were American wounded there. Al put together a team to go and try and pull the wounded out and bring them out. And as he did so, he was mortally wounded. For his actions, he received the Distinguished Service Cross.
Mike Grisafi. He was born in Illinois. His parents were both in education. His father was a college professor, and he always wanted to go to West Point. Mike was only about 5'3.5" in size, and the minimum was 5'4". So he did all kinds of stretching exercises and worked very hard and made the cut, and was admitted with the class with 800 plus other of our classmates. Great guy, heart of gold, but he always wanted to fly. After he went to flight school, he was assigned to Vietnam, and that's where he went down. Like I said, he was a highly intelligent individual, great guy to know. We were in the same regiment, and I just remember him as somebody who you could always depend on, and other people who knew him that I've talked to would echo the same remarks, that he was somebody who could always be depended on. And he was also known for being able to take the complex and make it simple and easy to understand. And that's a hard thing to do. I know he was a great pilot, I know he was a great armor officer, and he was one of the 33 that we lost far too early in their life.
Mike Snell. Mike was a dear, dear friend of mine. He's a Texas kid, and he went to West Point to have, like me, to have a good time. And then fast forward to 1969. I'm on Firebase Birch's Garden. I was a battery commander, the battery that supported the Hamburger Hill battle. And who walks across my battery area but Captain Mike Snell? And what was he carrying? He was carrying a fuse can with ice and beer. And it was the 13th of June, 1969, and we sat down in my hole, and we had a hamburger steak, rice and gravy for lunch out of a Mermite can, and we drank beer, and we reminisced. We had a great time. Then about 4 o'clock that afternoon, we shake hands and we hug, and he goes back down the hill to his tuck, which was at the bottom of the log pad. And then 5 hours later, he was dead. He was in a tuck, and we came under attack by the North Vietnamese. And he ran out of the tuck up the stairs to help a soldier who had been wounded. And a mortar round landed right beside him and went off and killed him. But Mike was just an exceptional human being. And I miss him terribly. Whenever I go to West Point, to the cemetery, he's buried at West Point. My wife and I both visit his grave because he really meant that much to us.
Lou and I were in the same company
for the first 2 years, Company C2 at West Point. Lou was a very quiet person, very reserved. He was very religious. He felt it was his duty to be a really good officer. So he had good moral and spiritual values, and these really were a very strong aspect of his life. He had unconditional respect for the honor code. Luke was awarded 2 Silver Stars in Vietnam. Very, very few military in any branch of the service are awarded 2 Silver Stars. So that's highly unusual to get 2. But Lou wasn't about decorations, and he wasn't about promotions. He had a much larger purpose in life than that. And that was reflected, I think, when he was in Vietnam.
Vietnamization continued as the strategy. U.S. troop withdrawals were very popular at home and became emphasized independent of battlefield demands. The anti-war demonstrations and anti-draft sentiments could not have been greater. The Paris talks continued, but still little progress.
In Paris, on Avenue Kléber, in a former Gestapo headquarters, politicians have been talking for 4 years about ending a war.
Cambodia was unstable, and Prince Sihanouk was overthrown and replaced with a weak pro-Western leader named Lon Nol in March of 1970. President Nixon ordered a direct troop invasion into Cambodia with joint U.S. Armed Force that successfully engaged NVA units previously enjoying sanctuary. But the action precipitated more outrage and violent demonstrations in the U.S. Disastrously, the National Guard killed 4 college students at Kent State. The entire country is on edge. Henry Kissinger is engaged in secret talks with Le Duc Tho, a North Vietnamese diplomat, and is intent on working toward a peace agreement by October 1972. Richard Nixon is re-elected in a 49-state landslide in November 1972. North Vietnam balks at the peace agreement. Nixon begins the famous Christmas bombing December 1972, which proved to be very effective. A multilateral peace agreement is ultimately signed January 27, 1973.
We today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam.
The POWs are returned and all U.S. troops will be withdrawn in 60 days. The last U.S. unit departs Vietnam on March 29, 1973. The Watergate drama paralyzes the executive branch throughout 1973 and results in President Nixon resigning in August 1974 and Gerald Ford becoming president. Fighting resumes across South Vietnam and Saigon falls in April 1975. The class of 1966 lost 2 fallen brothers in 1970 and our final Vietnam loss in 1971.
Doug Booth. To me, he was really the soldier's soldier. Unlike many of our class that came right out of high school, young, inexperienced, that wasn't Doug. Doug had spent 2 years in the Army and then another year at the United States Military Academy Prep School before he came in. He'd be the source of calm, he'd be the source of knowledge, and he was a leader right from day one. Did a great job in Vietnam, came home and spent a year at the engineer school here in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, but he sensed that he needed to be back in Vietnam. I was the aide to the engineer general in Vietnam at that time. I was on my second tour, just like Doug volunteered for his second tour also. And my job was to pick the guy to replace me, to be the new aide for the engineer general. And Doug was the best candidate. And so we spent a week or 2 together going over his responsibilities and his requirements for the job. And when I left Vietnam, I knew that I had picked the right guy, that he was going to do a great job. So you can imagine my shock when On May 18th of 1970, he and the general were flying in a helicopter, and it was shot down by a Soviet-made 57mm anti-aircraft gun, radar guided. The helicopter didn't stand a chance. So Doug and 9 others that were on that helicopter were killed in action. He would have done great things for the Army and for the country, and that's the sadness of losing somebody with that caliber of leadership, a true soldier's soldier.
Gordon Kimbrell was a classmate of mine who was killed in Vietnam. He had the AC-47, the gunship from the South Vietnamese was there supporting him, and he couldn't talk to it. He couldn't direct it because he didn't have the PRC-25 on squelch off. He had squelch on, which suppressed the Russian noise, and he didn't realize that. So we kept saying, "Get the squelch off, get the squelch off." And he couldn't hear us, but we were listening to it on a radio broadcast because we were listening to it thinking we might have to go in and help him out. But he got the AC-47 up. Spooky 4-1 was his call sign, and he directed them around. They just devastated the enemy, and he won the battle. That's what I remember about Gordon Kimbrell, and that's my story on Gordon Kimbrell. He was quiet, competent, professional, and dedicated. I would just tell you that for sure. He was just a good man to have. He was a real hero, great classmate, and a competent leader.
And while he was over there, unfortunately, he was caught in an ambush and was killed in action. And the sad thing about that, is even more so, is that he was within 2 weeks of completing that second tour and rotating back to the States. So it's, you know, with a lot of regret that I think about Gordy's passing.
Marty Niskanen. Marty, he was actually born here in D.C., Walter Reed Army Hospital. His first tour in Vietnam was as an advisor. So he had been to language school. He was at what they call a MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam advisor. He survived that tour, came back, and then when he went back on the second tour, he was with the 101st Airborne. And they had a mission to change locations, it was a troop deployment mission, and 33 people were in a helicopter, actually 34 counting Marty. He was a company commander, commanded an infantry company in the 101st, and the aircraft went down. Like all the rest of the young people on that wall, gave their life for this country far too young. Following conclusion of the war, political divisions became even more apparent, with cultural and societal segmenting within the country intensifying. Feelings of disappointment, anger, and resentment find their way into career decisions, and after 4 years of service commitment, a large fraction of the class resigns from the military to pursue other occupations and careers. Many will attend professional schools or enter the private business sector and make major contributions. Many other classmates go on to full, complete, and remarkable military careers. 3 classmates that began with us but chose to leave before graduation are lost in Vietnam. 2 were commissioned as Army officers through ROTC and were killed in action. A third was commissioned into the Air Force, served as a pilot of an F-4C flying out of Tan Son Nhut, and was lost and never recovered. With full troop withdrawal, return of the POWs, and Saigon falling in April 1975, we felt that our killed in action experience had concluded. Tragically, it had not, as we learned in August of 1976 that Art Boniface had been brutally killed by North Korean soldiers in the demilitarized zone. His death was shattering for his family and the entire class. A camp in Korea has been renamed Camp Boniface, and the events of his death are recounted and commemorated every August.
There was 2 gentlemen in uniform standing there, and I was like, hello, and they said, you know, is Marcia Boniface here? And I said, no, she's at her going away party, she'll be back soon. And they're like, okay, well, we'll just wait. So then Mom came home, and I saw her get stopped out front by the gentleman.
Art Boniface, he really wanted to get back to being with soldiers again, and decided to accept the position at the Joint Security Area in Korea. Now the joint security area, not many people have been there. It's right in the demilitarized zone of Korea, and it stretches from one side of Korea to the other, and Art's job was to be there facing the North Koreans every day. Art was 3 days from coming home from Korea. He'd served his tour at the place they call the loneliest and scariest spot in Korea. So here he is getting his bags packed, getting ready to go back to march-in the kids, and he has one more task to do. There's a tall poplar tree sitting there that was blocking the view into North Korea. So his task was to move out and cut down that tree. As that process was going along, a North Korean People's Army Jeep comes roaring over, and a lieutenant gets out, and the lieutenant begins screaming at Art, "Stop what you're doing. You can't be doing this, stop." The North Korean lieutenant hit him behind the head, knocked him to the ground. Then immediately 4 to 6 North Korean soldiers began to beat Art, laying on the ground. And they continued to do that for about 3 to 4 minutes. And I think the thing that shocked all of us is that we thought we were done with flag-covered coffins. We thought we were done seeing our friends and classmates killed. This is 1976. Vietnam was over for us. And to have someone killed in this manner was simply overwhelming and just so sad.
Efforts by the West Point classes of the 60s to honor and remember their fallen begin with construction of the Vietnam Memorial near Lusk Reservoir, which was completed in 1980. A national movement begins to memorialize all U.S. servicemen killed in Vietnam. Jack Wheeler, Art Mosley, and Tom Carhart from the class of 1966 are heavily involved. Jack becomes president of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Private contributions are raised. Land on the National Mall is acquired. A design competition, selection, and approval are finalized, and construction is completed in 1982.
We remember today that all our gentle heroes of Vietnam have given us a lesson in something more, a lesson in living love. Yes, for all of them, those who came back and those who did not, their love for their families lives. Their love for their buddies on the battlefields and friends back home lives. Their love of their country lives.
There are more than 58,000 names on the wall on the front side, those who paid the ultimate price. We also want to honor the 2 classmates, Jack Wheeler III and Art Mosley, who were instrumental in getting the wall approved, funded, and constructed.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial becomes an instant and continuing attraction on the National Mall. It is open 24/7 and is one of the most frequently visited memorials in the nation's capital. Maybe in part, the Vietnam Memorial begins to heal some of the deep scars of the conflict. A book describing the American journey of the class of 1966, The Long Gray Line, is written by Pulitzer-winning author Rick Atkinson and published to great acclaim in 1989. The book has sustained popularity and remains in print 36 years later. It becomes a great uniter for the entire class as military and civilian class members unify in fact, spirit, and pride. Bonds continue to strengthen as retirement looms, and events serve to strengthen relations with college friends, and a collective focus naturally begins to turn to those that we lost in the beginning, our fallen brothers. Plans develop to honor our fallen with a reunion in D.C. The DC event is centered on a memorial ceremony at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Planning commences and attendance estimates are revised upward again and again. Next of kin are sought and found for every classmate lost to enemy action. Nearly 100 next of kin attend the DC reunion in May of 2018 that totals nearly 600 attendees. The focus of the weekend is a ceremony at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial where a rose is given to the families of the fallen and placed near the fallen brother name on the wall.
They showed all the character and courage that MacArthur and the Long Gray Line could have ever expected or asked for. So we salute them today for their dedication to duty, for the honor with which they served, and for their courage and sacrifice. They're here with us now, not just in some ghostly assemblage. They're here in our hearts, our memories. We won't forget.
A few months later, an idea emerges to develop a legacy gift to West Point and the Association of Graduates that will honor our fallen brothers for all time. Important concepts seem to naturally fall into the construct that focuses on an activity that will occur at least annually and in perpetuity. A search begins for a way to deliver this legacy gift to the Association of Graduates and the Academy. Sponsorship of the annual ring melt is proposed and immediately seems to be embraced and supported by everyone at every level. Meetings throughout 2021 and 2022 lead to completion and signing of an agreement titled the Class of 1966 Legacy Endowment in Memory of Fallen Brothers. Funds are transferred in August 2022, and our first ring melt is sponsored by the Class of 1966 on January 13th, 2023. A short video is produced discussing the reasons for our sponsorship and the history of our fallen.
Each new graduate has a piece of the history of the school, the history of these people.
The ring melt involves every single cadet. It involves something that young man or young woman's going to carry for the rest of their lives.
Without our classmates, we wouldn't have made it. And if they can draw on the legacy with what they wear on their hand, that's a good thing.
The endowment secures the financial future of the annual ring melt, which Academy leadership has called the second most important annual event next to graduation.
I think the ring melt is one of the two most powerful ceremonies that we execute at the United States Military Academy. The donors of their rings come together and put it into the crucible to be melted into, that gold bar that then gets carried on year after year after year. I think that's really powerful. And when you sit back and think about it, it's one of the things that sets us apart from any other institution around the world.
It also grants metaphorical life to our fallen, as their names are read and stories retold at each annual ring melt. As legacy gold is added each year to the crucible and the long gray line strengthens, more and more leaders learn about the lives, service, valor, and leadership of our fallen and our class. The endowment secures the event's future in perpetuity. Our legacy is a real story that is relatable and should become an inspiration for living the motto and honorable service for young developing leaders.
They had a calling, they met that calling, and unfortunately somebody else took their life, but we will not forget that. We will not forget them.
Almost 20% of our class was either killed or seriously wounded in Vietnam. 1 out of 5, think about that. So then to hang out with these guys and remember those who didn't come back alive really kind of puts closure to all the memories that we have of our time in Vietnam.
We had the highest number killed in action in combat in Vietnam. And Art Boniface in Korea. Potential lieutenants and captains and majors and all in the Army. And their parents need to understand the sacrifices that they might be called on to make.
We've had the privilege of living these long lives and being here today, and they were snuffed out when they were basically young men, so full of promise. And the world would be better off with them here. And it's an honor to actually be here and be a part of this.
We owe our classmates a huge debt for the sacrifice that they made that we didn't have to make.
And I think about the families. Sometimes, we forget that while we were out serving in Vietnam and places like that, the families were left behind.
The most important part is to memorialize our classmates who died so young and didn't have the opportunity to live their lives fully.
We put that memorial there so that we wouldn't forget. And that's very, very important. Those names, though, those are people. They have family, they have friends, they have heroes, so they're very, very special. And so we want to make sure that they are not forgotten.
So we speak of legacy. We speak of a legacy of commitment, of people who were called to serve their country, who answered the call and did the best that they could.
Over the eras, the decades that have passed, things change. We're in constant change in our country, but some things never change. And some things should never change. And that is a commitment to your brother, your sister in arms, and a commitment to this country.
It's just so important for people to understand the service that these people provided. So many people forget. It's so easy to forget of what people have done for their country.
And so we need to remember. We need to remember that these young people stepped forward when the nation called and made that sacrifice.
The legacy of the class is the service.
It is about duty on our country. So it's a very serious business, and I hope you'll take it seriously. Country needs you.
Our time is coming to a close, and how do we keep the legacy going? It's the long gray line.
And that line has always walked the talk in terms of living the motto, duty on our country. And so honorable service is not an optional thing. It is what we expect. It is what you will learn to do, and it is what you will do. And your country needs you.
All right, I'm going to stop the video so that we could maximize our time here to talk about what we just saw. I was making notes through the documentary, which was a wonderful tribute to the 33 members of the class of West Point 1966 who died between 1967 and 1976. And, this is our second program we've done with the class of 1966. And I recall our other one that we did just about their experiences in the war in Vietnam that had a different tone, a different kind of tenor to the conversation, and a very different account of what coming home was like for them, a very different perspective toward the war. And I think this documentary also provides a different kind of tone and tenor toward paying tribute to those who fell in service to our country. I don't know if others detected that difference. Um, I hesitate to put it as bluntly as I think I'm going to put it. I think I'm going to be searching for words here to describe the tone, but I get the sense that the tone is grieving, yes, expressing awareness of the loss, but also there's a positive quality to it, an inspirational quality to the film that sometimes is missing when we talk about with family members, especially of those who died. Um, a couple times, members of the class said, "Duty, honor, country." We really believed it. Um, a few times, uh, in talking about those who fell, we have members of the class of '66 in that film saying, kind of, we all knew what we were signing up for. I don't get a sense of regret. I don't get a sense of, sometimes you'll hear people say, what a waste. There's a real kind of belief or faith that these who died in service to the country, and they would do it all over again if asked. Am I characterizing that tone correctly, Barry?
Thank you, Todd. And I do think you have identified some of the tone that was established as 80-year-old men recalled their 60 or the losses that we suffered 60 years prior. And the real motivation that we had was for making this video was to build on the promise that we have made through the endowment to West Point to keep these names alive. And really, we believe strongly, and I think there's a coalesced spirit within the class that believes this as well, that we have a responsibility to make sure that our fallen are never forgotten. And so that's one of the real drivers of putting this together, and the opportunity to have significant friends with contemporary knowledge of what happened and the individuals, and now have that on video that will continue to exist is just a really pretty significant thing in most of our minds. So I hope I've answered your question. That's why we did this.
Dom Nemchek puts in the chat here, heartbreaking stories. Just think of the lives these men would have lived had they survived the war in Vietnam. And that is a consistent theme in the film. What a loss not only for you personally and for their families, but a loss for the country. I mean, these are our country's leaders. And I think there's an overwhelming, I just felt an overwhelming sense of admiration for each of the fallen as leaders, as people who dedicated their lives to service. And I just keep on, I think that there's a message here for those of us like me who didn't know any of these men, but feel like we could learn from their example. And we don't always get that. I was curious, Renee Johnson, who's served in Vietnam as a donut dolly, you knew Skip McKibben?
I knew Skip McKibben and Rich Hood.
Tell me about them. How'd you know them?
My father was stationed at Fort Benning, and the summer between their junior and senior years, a lot of the guys would come down to go to jump school, and that's when I met Rich, the summer between his junior and senior year in '65. And he was really a great guy. We were both from Florida, had a lot of fun, and on he went. Skip came down after graduation again to go to jump school. He was one of the few that didn't go out and buy a brand new car. Everybody else was buying, like they said, the GTOs and Corvettes. He had an older Corvette, the one that was red with the white inset. I can't really describe it well. And I met him at the officers club, and I happened to be a blonde at the time by accident. It really was an accident. But we started going out, and he said this was always his live stream to have a Corvette and a blonde.
You
And
survived.
he and my parents just got along famously. We stayed friends and in contact until after he got to Vietnam. And it was just one of those things. He was just an honorable, super guy. He, as they said, he went into the Army first because his father was an admiral and he didn't want to go into the Navy Academy, which he could have done just because of his father's status. So he went to the Army and then went to the prep school because he wanted to be an Army officer, and he was just an admirable human being. He was great.
He was a member of the 1st Infantry Division, and Rich Hood was killed at Dak To in November 1967.
Right. Mhm.
Right. Nancy Smoyer.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the comment that several of them made, and I've heard, which is that it was such a waste to have lost them. And there was a time at the walls where somebody said that, looking at the names, and a volunteer said, no, their lives were not a waste. They did have their time before they were killed, and it had an impact. And as we can see, we can really see that from these men that died, that even though their lives were shortened, their lives before they died had a huge impact for forever, really.
Absolutely. Every Memorial Day, every time we talk about the fallen, somebody will say, you know, what a waste of life, what a waste of life Vietnam was, what a waste of life any war is. But this film, I think, defies that sentiment, you know, asks us or invites us or convinces us to move beyond that kind of shallow understanding that, yeah, the lives may have been short, but these are men who died doing what they were committed to do. I do get the sense, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe somebody here wants to correct me, but I get the sense that if you were to ask these men, would you do it again, knowing how it's going to end, they would do it again. Maybe I'm naive, but that's the sense I get.
Todd, can I add something? One of the motivations that we've had here is, as I said, is that we feel like it's absolutely a requirement that we create realities so that these names are never lost, that their faces are refreshed, their deeds are refreshed, and that continues on. And we use the word in perpetuity. We've used it so often that it's found its way into the lexicon of the Association of Graduates and the Academy leadership, the superintendent himself. And so we really anticipate that this video will be made available to cadets who are being exposed to many things, a lot of hard work, and that they will somehow, it will imbue in them potentially the notion that they have a responsibility to carry out the nation's military activities if that becomes a requirement. And we don't have the luxury of not having that opportunity. And even though 60 years have passed since we graduated, I don't remember in my lifetime when I felt we have a more unstable world than we have right today, and that we need these individuals more than we've ever needed them. Goodness gracious.
Agreed. Agreed, Barry. Steve Corbett here puts in the chat, I believe the loss was ours. We have not enjoyed their company, their love, and their leadership. Absolutely. And doesn't the film also, I mean, doesn't the film also ask us to kind of be worthy of their sacrifice? To kind of live lives that are worthy of their sacrifice? It's quite humbling to hear the stories of these 33 who did a whole lot more in their short lives, you know, than most of us have done. Fritz, your thoughts? Any thoughts?
Yeah, this is
I don't know, probably the 15th or 16th time I've seen it, seen the video because I was part of the group that put it together. And every time I hear something different and I have different thoughts. And knowing that I was going to be here this evening, I was thinking about Doug Booth, for example. Um, Doug and I were both nominated for that position of being the general's aide. I happened to be on R&R at the time that he was killed. But my point is only that, though, but through the grace of God, that could have been me. And I hope that I have, I continued my career for, another 20 plus years in the Army and then supported the Defense Department after that. And I hope that, as you say, I hope that I have been worthy of the effort and the sacrifice that they made. And the other the thing that I would like to say is that we as a group that were putting this together, we were blessed to have the assistance of some of the families. Many of the pictures that you saw were given to us by families of the fallen. And that was, all put together by the folks that did the show. And it was truly a labor of love on all of our parts. And I can't help but think each time I listen to it and each time I watch it, think about those people. And, we're coming up on our 60th anniversary of our graduation. And I, for whatever reason, I was doing something today, and on the 8th of June, it will be 21,914 days since we graduated. And I was reflecting on the fact that, we used to call the minutes. It was so many days until graduation. And here we are 60 days or 60 years later. And I can say that, it's been over 21,000 days since that time that we have been able to hopefully continue to serve. That's what it's been all about.
60 years since you graduated 1 week from today.
Right.
Amazing.
8th of June.
Gretchen Ziegler, you asked to have your camera turned on. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, my video wouldn't come back on, so I
Oh,
was trying to
okay.
get my video back. Thanks.
You bet.
Friday is donut day, so get your free donut. And if Donut Dolly helped you when you were in Vietnam, please tell our story.
What do you mean Friday is donut day? Every Friday is donut day?
No, the first Friday in June.
First Friday in June is it Donut Dolly Day or Donut Day?
It's a donut day. It was started by the Salvation Army women who were donut dollies in World War I.
Oh, got it. Okay, first Friday in June. Didn't realize that. Thank you, Gretchen. Gil, Ferry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I thought that donut came from World War I, where it really meant do not eat too many. But wrong. The group of you in '66 that put this together, excuse me, are certainly to be complimented, and the family members, etc., because it's I don't know what's wrong with my throat. It's a relationship that you've maintained to this day, and not just because of the men that were lost, but because of those who served and survived as well. And I think that's I went over in '66 with the 11th ACR. I was kind of interested. There weren't too many not too many graduates in your class that went armor branch. I served with a bunch of them: John Landry, Larry Gunderman. There were probably 15 young officers, first lieutenants, second lieutenants, platoon leaders, XO of a troop that I served with. I was not a jumper, but I was with the 11th ACR and with the 173rd up in Operation Junction City 1, the only combat jump of the war. And as you probably know, there was Well, have any other classes tried to do this, the same thing you've done? Class of 64, 65,
Good question. Thank you,
70,
Gil.
68?
Yeah, thank you, Gil. Let's ask. Barry or Fritz, do you know of any other class that does something like this?
So it's hard to prove a negative, but I will hypothesize one simply because we are so embedded with the Association of Graduates, who has they're linked to all the other classes as well. And as unique as each class believes that they are, and they are, the classes of the 60s are pretty highly related in Vietnam language, because most of those series that came out in the 60s, particularly the last part of the 60s, were exactly in our position. The 3 big years that we were there saw 40,000 casualties of the 58,000 total. So I mean, that was really the crunch time. One of the things that I will tell you that the Association of Graduates, their leaders are aware of this film. They have watched this film we had an online screening premiere in February before we showed it for the first time live with an audience in person. That was in Eisenhower Hall on April 25th. And in both cases, there was a large component of the Association of Graduate leadership there. So we anticipate that it will be a conversation during leaders conference and something like that, in terms of how did you do it? What did you do? Is it of any value? I think those are all questions that have merit. And certainly we have a formula for how to approach it, but don't do it unless you really want to roll your sleeves up and grind. It does not build itself.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Barb Smith. Barb, we can't hear you. Why is that?
That maybe?
There we go. We hear you now.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with these fine guests. And I was just wondering if all the West Pointers in the audience might raise their ring finger that has their West Point ring, almost as a salute to their fallen comrades, that we can see your rings. Is that possible?
Let's see.
Ah, thank you. Thank you very much.
May I ask, I know there are some people here who haven't joined us before or don't join us often that I suspect are related to the film in the class of 1966. Bob Lowry, I see Liz, Terry Farish, and of course I know John Loftheim, who lost his brother Denny. If you want to say something, or if you want to, tell us why you joined us, why you viewed the film, you can let us know.
There's a connection. YouTube.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. One of the main reasons that I'm here is because my Donut Dolly sisters sent out a memo saying that you were going to have it. But I also, one of the 1966 West Point graduates, Bill Poole, who is actually in Columbus, Georgia tonight doing something for veterans there. He is a strong supporter of all of the Vietnam veterans. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he actually has activated the mobile Vietnam wall, the wall that heals, to come here to Dahlonega, which is a very small town, last year. And it was just so meaningful. And there's just so many. He's another one of the West Point graduates that is just outstanding. So I'm grateful to you, all of you, and I learned how wonderful all of the West Point graduates are. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much, Liz, for joining us.
We remember Dahlonega very well as
Yeah.
part of our mountain vacation during the middle of Ranger School.
So, Bob, you are a graduate of 1966 West Point?
Yes, I am. I had the privilege of participating in producing this movie, thanks to Barry, and I got to say it was a tremendously rewarding emotional experience. As was said before, it was a labor of love, and it brought back a lot of bittersweet memories.
Yeah. Yeah, it's opening up. That is, I think that's the thing that you face when you work on a project like this is you're opening up a box of memories that, is not that invites pain, it invites grief, it invites, bad memories. And so you have to endure that but it's such a wonderful gift, I think, to the families and to your class and to the rest of us. Dibby Clark, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you want to say a few words.
I just I have a family with a lot of West Point graduates going back to 1938, 39. And it means a lot. And I wanted to watch this. I missed the film. So you've put that up, and I really, really appreciate that. So I can go back and look at it, because the most recent one was, oh, good heavens, there was class of 83, and then there was one that was 2006, I think. So we still had family members going to West Point.
Right.
And
thank you,
thank
Dibby.
you.
Thank you for joining us. I see Rusty
Todd?
Korea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Rusty. I apologize. I am on a machine whose camera does not work, so I've been lurking here. But I actually have a bit part in this thing. I think I have about a half second of screen time, where the Al Nason and I are stepping back from the snowy monument to from the class of the 60s. So this is, I guess, about the fourth time I've seen this, and I will continue to watch it just every chance I get. The you're thrown into a crucible with all of these all of your classmates on that first day, and especially in our era, we pretty much all took the same classes and had the same training experiences, and you develop a bond that is just absolutely unbelievable. And these people mean so much to all of us. Denny Loftheim and I were in the same company just for 2 years, our last 2 years, and I mean, I think everybody in the class knew, just what a cadet stud Denny was. I mean, he was the epitome of the squared away cadet, and we all knew he was going to be a terrific officer, and probably would have been. I I would like to take a couple of seconds. I want to. The comment was made about one of the individuals saying, "What a waste." I'd like to come to Bob Scales' defense here. He was talking about Frank Rybick, and unfortunately, uh, Frank was killed in an accident, basically, and he. Well, I won't go into the description, but he's as dead from an accident as he was from enemy action, and I am sure that that was what Bob was referring to.
Yeah.
We all have different feelings about Vietnam. Did the country serve as well? Did the Army serve as well? Many of us went into there with very little training. I was an armor officer. There weren't that many armor officers in the class, but to the best of my knowledge, every single one of us went. Dave Crocker and I happened to be in the 25th Division at the same time, although not close enough together to see one another. We both happened to be in mechanized infantry units, and I can remember reporting in and going into the division personnel office, and they kind of look at me and say, "What are we going to do with this guy?" They're on it. There's about 3 armor slots in the whole division, and I was fortunate to get into the particular unit that I did. I would not have wanted to go any other way, and my CIB is my most prized decoration.
Thank you so much, Rusty. Boy, how eloquent you are. Greg Yost.
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. I appreciate all that you put into it. Todd put the link to the YouTube video in the chat room if anyone wants to check that out. I bookmarked it already, and I'm going to be watching this again. I appreciate the video and all that you did for this. I have 2 questions. Let's see. The first is sort of almost trivial or inane, but I do want to circle back to the comments that William, I guess, Rusty Korea just made here. Okay, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but you guys were in the class of 1966, so many of you were born in 1944. Were any of your classmates born on June 6, 1944? That was not only D-Day, that was graduation day. So just out of curiosity, were there any June 6, 44 babies in your class?
That's a good question. And it's worthy of research.
Okay. I just thought that might be an interesting thing to look into. I didn't know if you would have celebrated that while you were there. Hey, here's the June 6th baby. I don't know, whatever. So on that more serious note, I think William Rusty Korea here sort of touched on something that I was going to ask, but I'm glad he broached the subject. And I guess the question was your West Point training, did it prepare you for Vietnam? Or was it too academic or too engineering, or was it? And I don't know. And I'm asking, was it hands-on enough to prepare you for Vietnam? And if would you suggest that the Military Academy USMA has it changed its curriculum since you graduated to make it more practical or more hands-on? I'm asking. He touched out on that. So were you prepared for Vietnam in a way that you should have been more so as opposed to some of the academic stuff?
Great question, Greg. Wonderful question. I'll offer the floor to Fritz and Bob and
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that just briefly. And the answer is yes and no. Um, it was interesting. You hit on a number of things. We had 4 years of academics, but we also had an awful lot of military training that was interspersed with all of that. Each summer, we participated in military type training. We were away from the books, we were away from the classroom. So we did all of those kinds of things. Um, our class, for a number of reasons, which I don't really know what they all were because I wasn't the decision maker, but our class, generally speaking, did not go to the basic course for officers. We went straight from Ranger School was mandatory for, at that particular time, Ranger School was mandatory for anyone with an RA commission. So all of us went to Ranger School. Airborne school was voluntary. Most of us, while we were at Fort Benning, we said, hey, it's an extra $110 a month. Let's go for it. And actually, in my case, I went through Ranger School first and had a week in between that and Airborne School. And Airborne School was a cakewalk compared to Ranger School. We lived in barracks. Whatever. It just was totally different thing. But we then went straight from Ranger and Airborne to our first unit. And I would say that we had a good basis for going to a unit. But in my case, and I'll just use myself because that's what I can speak to most clearly. And as I was an engineer, and I went to an engineer assignment in Thailand for my first assignment. And if I had gone to the basic course, I would have gone through and learned something about the engineer equipment, the stuff that moves dirt, the stuff that builds buildings and all that kind of stuff. We didn't have any of that, and that wasn't part of our classroom instruction. And so when I arrived in Thailand in December of 1966, and my company commander says, you're going to be the earth moving platoon leader, I said, okay, what does that mean to myself? Fortunately, I had wonderful, great NCOs that took me under their wing, and I hopefully was a quick learner. And uh, in my particular case, I served with engineer units throughout my service, all of them with one exception being construction battalions. And so I had the civil engineering background, and so from that standpoint, I had the theory and the knowledge. I just didn't have a lot of the practical stuff of, here we are out in the field, and your grader breaks down, or your dozer breaks down, or your earth move, your scraper moves down. What do you do next, Lieutenant? How do you how do you work your way through the logistics system, which was broken at the time, and I'm sure it's not any a whole lot better now, but it's all those kinds of little things that you learn on a day-to-day basis that you don't learn in the classroom. And I'm not sure that had we had any other kind of instruction, we would have learned it there either. So we had to try to summarize what I'm saying is we had a good basis for what we were going into. We just didn't have a lot of the details that a second lieutenant could use on a day-to-day basis. Those are my thoughts.
That's very,
Todd,
very
can I
well
say
said, Todd.
something?
Yeah, please do.
So Fritz made a lot of great points. I'm going to make a couple more just very quickly. The first is that not sending newly commissioned officers into various branches to the basic branch officer training was considered a egregious error and was not repeated. So that was a major change. I think Greg asked a question about what did West Point do differently. Well, one of the things they didn't enable that any further. And actually, that was probably not a West Point decision. That was big Army. The second is, despite the value of having the basic training, I think there was nothing that would be superior to Ranger School in terms of prepping you for Vietnam. And by 1966, 67, 68, and 69, what was going on in Ranger School was exactly what was going on in Vietnam. And so I believe it to be a life-saving kind of educational activity for which there is now absolute choice. But in the 60s, there was no choice for those classes. Everybody had to go and give it a try. It didn't mean everybody got through it, but everybody started it. And John Loftheim, I would love to hear something from you tonight, because you were so valuable coming onto the team as not just a member of the team, but also someone with skin in the game with respect to Denny. And Todd, I wanted to make that comment too. One of the artful decisions that we made in building it was to make sure we brought in not just old military guys, but also widows, siblings, and children. And so those are kind of sprinkled along with speaking parts, which I hope will be found to be of some benefit in the future.
Right. John Loftheim, thank you for joining us. Yes, you're a Gold Star brother as well as West Point graduate.
Well, thank you for having us on. I can tell you that it made me, like the others that have spoken tonight, really think about my classmates. Now, of course, Denny was foremost, but I learned every time I listen to this, watch it, I guess I should say, I learned something more about those classmates, because we weren't, while you're at the academy and there's over 500 of us, you don't get to know everybody well. But you do see what a tremendous bunch of folks that I had the privilege of going to the academy with, and later on serving with some of them. When I was asked to do this, I'll be honest with you, I had second thoughts about talking about Denny in a case like this. But as we went along, I realized how important it was, not only to me, but to honor my folks. Everyone had to go through the thought process of, what do I tell my folks I'm going to do? And Denny and I, we both volunteered out of the academy to go to Vietnam. How do we tell them that that's the decision that we've made? My folks were great. They listened, they understood. And then when Denny was killed and I had to come home for that, they understood when I said, I'm still going. and there was an option out. And I decided not to take that. That's not what I'd been trained for. That's what I wanted to do. So I give a lot of credit, not only to my folks, but to the folks of all those folk, of all the classmates who paid that ultimate sacrifice out there. With reference to training for Vietnam, I honestly felt that we got the leadership training, the basics, while I was at the academy. I think all of us really learned how to lead others. We learned how to think on our feet. And when the unexpected happened, to try and figure out what else to do. For me, armor at that time was sending us to jungle warfare school before we went over to Vietnam. So in addition to Ranger and Airborne school, I had jungle warfare school. And I thought it was interesting. I was an armor officer. When I got over there, I was with a CAV platoon, and we got some strange assignments at times. And one of them included an airborne operation or with helicopters. And I can tell you that one of my men had ever been in a helicopter before. So it was interesting showing them how to lead, how to load and to unload and secure the field once we hit the ground. And then to throw a little more, another wrench in the thing, we were supposed to be airlifted out, and there were no helicopters available. So we got to walk out, which, normally is no big thing, except you had to cross a river. Well, then I found out that a lot of my folks really didn't know how to swim. Thank God that I had brought ropes along and was able to put together a rope crossing across the river, and we got all of our equipment and our men out. The individuals that I had in the platoon were really a mixed bag. There were a few that were volunteers for Vietnam, but many of them had been brought in by the draft, etc. The training that they got to be in an armored CAV platoon was really pretty poor at that time. I had the senior leadership in the platoon that did not know how to read a map while you're on the go on a vehicle. So I was teaching as we went along.
Wow.
So I guess it was a mixed bag when you talk about the prep that we had to go to Vietnam. In many ways, though, I don't think we're any different than the classes that preceded us. It's just a leadership issue when you get out there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Man, the eloquence of you guys is just amazing. Al Smith in the chat here says, I don't think anybody who went to Vietnam was totally prepared for it. How could you be? You have to learn. There are some things you just have to learn on the job. But I love the way John explained how what you learned was how to learn. What you learned was how to stay observant and respond appropriately in the situation. Problem solve. And that your brother served with one of those killed, who was mentioned, Dave Crocker. Ruth Crocker was one of the narrators in the film. She was in the Zoom. She had to leave early. She was Dave's widow. And your brother, who served with Dave, thought very highly of Captain Crocker, correct?
That's right. He wrote home very detailed letters of his experience in Vietnam, and he went over in July of '68, right after the Tet Offensive, and was caught in a lot of the really intense battles. And he was in an APC mechanized unit up near Dao Tiang. And then Dave Crocker came along in December of 1969. They had lost some other commanding officers. There was a lot of a high kill rate. So my brother had written home in his letters that he had talked about some of the other commanding officers, but he really highly regarded Dave Crocker. He said he was first of all, a great leader, but a decent human being. He said he was great to get along with. And he was so torn up when he was killed. And then my brother was continuing on until later, several months after Dave was killed. And I think that affected him with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder after he came home and of the other things he experienced. And then he eventually got an Agent Orange related cancer and passed away. But I know that he greatly admired Dave and went to the Vietnam Wall, did a rubbing of his name and has it framed. My brother's children have that frame still. So Dave Cracker was a really important person in his life. So it was really by a great coincidence that I met Ruth Cracker, and we've become really good friends and have shared a lot of stories. And she told me about this film, and I knew about the ring melting ceremony, and it's just I'm just very touched. This film was just excellent. It's the first time I've seen it. I'm really proud of Ruth for being a Gold Star wife and carrying such a legacy on for Dave.
And writing a book about Dave and her experiences
Right.
becoming a Gold Star wife called Those Who Remain, a wonderful book.
Yes.
Thank you, Annette. I'm going to give
Sure.
Dick Snyder, if he has raised his hand and then walks away.
He's running back.
Dick, I love how you raise your hand and then you walk right away. Dave, you're going to have the last word because it's 9 o'clock. How are you, Dick?
Great. One thing I like to say is that these young men were 4 years from high school.
Yeah.
And so the leadership, they had leadership. Or they, the academy taught them how to do leadership. But if you stop and think of what the academy, not just Army Academy, but all the academies, that these people are 4 years from high school. Just think what the training they must have went through to be that proficient in their jobs in just 4 years
It's
from high
stunning.
school.
Dick,
It's stunning. It is
stunning to me. Stunning to me when I look back and think of myself at age 22 or 23.
Yes.
And can't imagine doing what these men did. Leading how these men did in combat. It's beyond anything I could imagine. It's just, my heart just swelled in admiration. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Fritz. Thank you, Barry, for bringing this program to us, and John, and Rusty, and Bob Lowry, and Dale Hansen, who we didn't get to talk to, unfortunately, class of 1968. Thank you for joining us for this really great conversation. And the conversation that we have here at the Veterans Breakfast Club really is an ongoing conversation. We keep on talking about what service means, how service transforms people, their lives, and the lives around them. That's what the Veterans Breakfast Club is all about. And we'll be back on Thursday night with our program on the Battle of Manila in World War II. And then we'll be back next week talking about the Mobile Riverine Force in Vietnam. Take care, everybody. Thank you again. Good night.
Good night.